Greater Atlanta Christian was born as an idea in the 1950s that did not come to pass. There were church meetings, there were gatherings in Atlanta about it. Oh, we're going to build a Christian school, it's going to be great. And so in 1968, the doors of GAC opened on a farm in almost rural Georgia. But they began with 150 students in its first year. I came in year 5 as a young teacher, and I still remember that first faculty meeting, all 12 of us in that room. And I was the youngest one in the room at age 21, fresh out of Harding, by the way, just arrived. And they wondered, what is this young pup possibly going to bring to us? So I was blessed and cursed to be a preacher's kid. And really, there's a lot of blessing to that. But I was born actually in Metro Atlanta as a child, but being a minister's son. And in a family like that, we moved a good bit. I lived in Louisville, Kentucky for a good bit, Washington, D.C. for a time. I didn't come from a family of educators. I came from families that did not know to value that very much. And so my dad was the first one in his family of a number of kids who went to college at all. And so he went to Freed-Hardeman College, some of you have heard of that, and got a preaching degree, which was just a 2-year certificate. And that was fine. And then he had children, including myself, and there was a fire inside of him for learning. So he had to go to college. It was later on, and my mom had to work for ends to meet, and who was going to take care of David? Well, so he took me to the library. I don't mean once, but on a regular basis. I was sitting at the U of L library. Then when he finished his degree there, at Southern Baptist Theological in Louisville. And then when he was done there at Columbia. And I was all the time surrounded by books at age 7, 8, 9, and 10. Eventually I just said, well, I need to pull down one of these things and see what in the world people are paying attention to. Growing up in a Christian family, it was who we were. It was who we were going to be all the way along. I never questioned my faith in any way along the way. But I began to wonder about some things as time passed, good things. And it was always great to have a resource in my father that I could ask the difficult questions to, and I wouldn't get snap, trite answers. I'd go deep, and he'd go deeper, and that was always so good for me to be able to ask those kind of things. I remember, though, the difference between intellectual faith and life faith, because actually a Harding professor came to my church to preach, and he convicted me that I'd been living the intellectual side and never the full side. So Harding was already affecting me when I was 15 and 16, and I didn't know it, and I was thankful for it. So when I wanted to think about what deep and abiding faith would mean, Harding was a pull for me. My parents encouraged me to another Christian college, which is fine. But there was still something to fire for me that I should be there. And so they gave in, and I went there, and I don't regret it. I loved the joyous times, the easy times. I was made better by the harder times, frankly. And some of the harder professors were very good for me. But I loved the deep thought. It was in a cappella with Uncle Bud, as they called him at that time. A little club, it was a tiny club at the time called TNT. And I thought it ought to be bigger. And so by the time I was a senior, it was. And I wanted it to be that way as much as possible. Many departments in Harding can claim that I was once one of their majors, because I managed to visit many of them. As for is done, I could speak Koine Greek, or at least I thought I could. But I ended up in history and political science emphasis, because the more I took it, the more I realized that it gave you insights not just into the past and how we came to where we are today, but into the very nature of human beings, the factors that drove them and made them who they are. While our circumstances change the nature of humans and their wonderful accomplishments and abilities and dreams, as well as their deep abiding flaws, become clear all the way through. Plus, when one knows the past, one can often see a little bit better about what may happen in the future. Mark Twain is given credit for something he said once. He said, "History does not repeat itself, but it rhymes." And so often I'm curious and see humor in the way the future can be, at least in part, predicted by the past. But that's also equally true in churches and in homes and in faith institutions and in nonprofits and in the kingdom of God and all the things that we're to do. We need to be reflecting on how we will serve in the times in which we are born, not always longing for a time that no longer exists. We're called to now, not then. By my junior year, I knew everything pretty much and was pretty confident on all the world. And transfers were coming from another college, another one of our Christian colleges. Many of them at that time only went to 2 years. She was in one of those. And so she came over, and I was club beau for a club called Zeta Rho. And the grand thing back then, I have no idea what the rules are now, was that every new pledge had to have a date with the club beau. I liked that. So I was playing ping pong one day, and this beautiful girl walked over and said, "Hi, I'm Beth Saxton, and I'm supposed to have a date with you." And I was busy in a very competitive match. And so I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, if you'll just go over there and buy me a Coca-Cola and stand there while I play this ping pong match, we'll call it a date, and I'll sign your book." So I could tell from her grimace that wasn't great, but she did it. And I enjoyed my Coke and I signed her book. And off she went. And I thought, I should have treated her better than that. So in our studies, I was a pretty good student. And so I would go to the library to study. And I noticed this girl about 3 tables over had this incredible smile and was studying very seriously. Might be even as bright as me, maybe. And I became more and more interested in her and her character. So I began to make the point to go to the library even more often. That was the beginning of what has lasted now over 50 years. Beth was brought into my life to add depth and humility and wisdom and insight. She is my sounding board and fellow brain in so many kinds of things that we consider. We have grown together not only in love but in thought. She is a deep reader, as am I, and we discuss and debate ideas and changes and theology and politics and meaningful purpose all the time. Life is not stagnant when you turn 21 or 25 or 45. If life is good, you are always growing and changing and asking God, what next? What am I considering? What am I absolutely certain of that really isn't so certain that I need to rethink? We've grown not only closer together, but been able to wrestle with the difficult questions of faith and theology and our ethical walk and our purpose in life. And it's ever been evolving in God's great tapestry of plans. And I think He planted her there to keep me evolving.
The impact of Dr. Fincher at GAC is, I just don't even know how to put it into words.
When anybody in the office, church office, imitates Dr. Fincher, he has this kind of sideways handshake where he says, "Hey there, look out."
Never had someone be able to correct me. And when he corrects me, I feel better about it.
I think his impact has been to think about not just how we can serve members of churches of Christ, if you will, but how we can reach out to the broader Christian community.
His leadership in general, things come from the top. And so when you want something done at any organization, your leadership is what, starts it all. And change is hard for a lot of people, and he's able to think of, from a visionary standpoint, a direction that needs to be gone in, and then bring people along, because it's the bringing people along that makes it successful.
One of my favorite memories about David has to do with something we were trying to accomplish at campus. At the church, we've really tried to foster an atmosphere of safety and vulnerability. So I asked all of the elders to take a turn on a given Sunday to get up before the sermon and share. What I asked them to do was share something that maybe everybody doesn't know about you, and maybe you didn't want people to know about you, a vulnerability. David, who is this important figure, and he got up that Sunday and shared a deep vulnerability that a lot of people would have been afraid to say in front of other people because it exposed a personal weakness of his. If you come to Campus Church today, like you would discover pretty quickly, this is a special place, and this is a place where it's safe to be yourself. And David has a lot to do with that because of his own willingness to, even as a great leader, be vulnerable in front of the body.
He has been characterized, and sometimes likes to characterize himself as a dreamer, dreaming what could be in Christian education and at GAC in particular, and then not just conceiving of those things, but coming up with a cohesive plan to make them reality. And then I think another big part of it, particularly here at GAC, is finding the right people to help make that dream a reality.
I'm Kim Standridge, and I am David Fincher's daughter. My dad is an awesome grandfather. He's granddaddy, and he has always made an effort to be a part of their daily lives. He has always taken an active interest in not just what they do, but who they are, and developing their character, wanting to know what they are about, what they are passionate about, developing those passions with them.
Dr. Fincher invests in people, and people matter to him, and so he spends time with people. In 1999, when I was a young principal here on campus, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. And the morning after an evening of tests and some diagnosis, Dr. Fincher was the first person to be in my office. And it was after text and phone call, but he showed up physically to be with me, to pray with me, to care for me, to care for my family. And he walked with us throughout that time, a very difficult time in my life and our family's life. And Dr. Fincher was there as a friend, as well as a mentor, as well as a great boss, to help us during that time. And it made all the difference to me and to my wife and children.
So when Dr. Mike called me and said, we would like to name you the Distinguished Alumnus of the Year, my first thought was, they must have run out of good ones and are having to pick somebody. So it might well be me. But I actually was quite honored by it. I'm pleased to be a part of it. To the Harding community, to board members, to faculty, to friends, I guess I would suggest to each of you to join me in asking, how can we be purpose-driven in our life to our very last breath? As long as God gives you life and purpose, it is not for me, it's not for you. He does indeed want us to have joy. He really does, and He gives it every single day. But oh, we've got a job to do, and we're going to do it. I know you're going to join in that all of your days as well.